Okay, so pain points.
You're looking at me there.
Well, on the agenda we talk about road to zero planning, and necessarily that encompasses policy, legislation, targets. There's nobody better round the table. I mean, Amber, you may well throw some stuff in around the heavy stuff, but Matt, can you give us a sense of the framework within which businesses are trying to operate at the moment? Because we've talked here already about limited resources, so budgets are tight, targets are high. What's going on in Scottish Government and Transport Scotland to frame this move to net zero for transport? What can people expect? And what are your perceived stumbling blocks, the things which are slowing progress?
I think the first thing is we face a number of different challenges, and I think the first challenge we need to highlight is the challenge of decarbonisation. Transport's the single biggest contributor to carbon emissions in Scotland, and road transport is the single biggest component of transport carbon emissions. So, understandably, Scottish Government is committed to decarbonising transport. Scottish ministers have declared a climate emergency. So it's a key focus of the work that we do in government to look at transport decarbonisation and how we can develop policy to support organisations across Scotland to decarbonise. I think there's a number of other challenges it's worth mentioning as well when we're talking about the context in Scotland where we are in 2024. We faced a number of challenges, the sector's faced a number of challenges over the last few years. COVID, Brexit before then, and the war in Ukraine all had an impact on the supply chain for zero-emission vehicles, the cost of those vehicles, and also an impact on public sector finances as well. So it's important when we think about transport decarbonisation, and particularly from a public sector context, to be aware of those challenges. And I'm sure public sector fleet operators around the table will be well aware of those challenges.
Those key opportunities, Matt. So from here on in, we're looking to the UK government for clarification on whether we have a 2030 ban on new petrol and diesel vehicles or a 2035. That would give some more certainty around this area. But where are the opportunities? We've heard hydrogen mentioned, we've heard HGV trials mentioned, we've heard skills gaps and opportunities to close those gaps and skill people. Where do you see the opportunities?
Well, I think the ban is it's important that you reference that because I think private sector wants certainty to invest. Huge amounts of money coming into Scotland's EV charging infrastructure is driven by certainty that we are going to make the switch, that the investment made is gonna result in a return on that investment. So having clarity over the ban is really important. I think one of the things we do have clarity on is what's referred to often as the Z mandate. The phasing out the sale of petrol and diesel cars and increasing the sale of zero-emission vehicles. That does provide a degree of certainty when it comes to cars and light commercial vehicles. I think we'll have greater clarity around the ban later this year. Obviously, the ban only relates to cars and light commercial vehicles, and I think I would imagine in due course the UK government will be thinking about heavier vehicles as well. And I think that in terms of opportunities, there's a lot of private sector funding available out there, and I think that's something that my colleague Amber can talk to. We're aware that a lot of companies are looking to invest in transport decarbonisation in both vehicles and infrastructure, and I think those creates opportunities. I think that there are a lot of assets if they're shared then can be used to generate revenue. I think public EV charging infrastructure is a good example. Delivering public EV charging infrastructure. If local authorities do that, it can be a cost to the local authority. Is it an asset or is it a liability? It's a piece of electrical equipment that ultimately ages and costs the local authority money. if local authority outsources the provision of that infrastructure, local authority can use the assets, the network connection it has, the car parking spaces in that local authority car park can be the asset, and it can essentially lease that to a private company that is geared to run, private, public and fleet EV charging infrastructure, and they can take on the responsibility, and the local authority benefits from that commercial arrangement. There's examples like that where the public sector can benefit from the decarbonisation of transport. But I think also there are a lot of fleet depots where we can look to share infrastructure and also potentially share vehicles as well. And there are examples of that across Scotland where your local authorities are looking to work in partnership to share vehicles and infrastructure. And I think we really need to do more of that to offset the higher cost. And cost has been mentioned. The current higher cost of a lot of transport decarbonisation technologies. Over time we will see price parity, but in the meantime we need to look at really sweating those assets and maximising the value of the resources and facilities that we do have to make them work for us as hard as they possibly can do. So I think fundamentally we can't really do things the way we've done them before. Operating a decarbonised fleet isn't going to be the same as operating a fleet powered by petrol and diesel. So we need to embrace new ways of delivering services in order to realise decarbonisation. And I think quite often fleet managers, when they're looking to decarbonise, often approach zero emission vehicles in a couple of different ways. They focus on the way they currently do things, and they try and find a vehicle that suits the way they already do things, or they look at the way that vehicle operates and try and find new ways to deliver services that can be accommodated by that vehicle. And I think we need to look at ways we can be flexible and still deliver high quality public services when we're talking about the public sector, to ensure that we maximise the value of that new technology. And there will be challenges along the way, but I think that we're more than capable. We're an innovative country with a history of innovation. I think there's a lot we can achieve if we put our minds to it.
I suppose at the end of the day, like college, you do feel a bit worn out. I won't lie. And just now it's probably the toughest in the 25 years of being in the industry. You find it because there's challenges financially, and you're looking at new innovation, you're looking at ways of working. I know it's moved on, but if you actually just look at COVID, the transition to EV, there was like this foundation laid. And all we'll have to do, in my opinion, I know there's challenges now, and we're trying to get the roof on something that will build without the money to put the roof on, if that's the right thing. I get that, but I just think we have built up this, and all we need to do is just find the roof. And I try to say that to people, even like some of the EV stuff. I mean, we took on 2 heavies, 16.2 tonners, and no, they'll never work. They've never missed a beat. They've never missed a beat. They're probably more reliable than our diesel versions. People are enjoying because they are genuinely a more comfortable drive. There's no the noise. There's no the things. We're fit solar panels. We had to go through a massive training thing because these guys were just we used to drive the 7.2 tonners, which you can drive our grandfathers. Like we then went to Skills Development Scotland, who supported upskilling them to a Class 2 licence. So they were actually, you were giving something back to the staff because that licence is relevant to them, not us. They can go away and do what they want there, fundamentally. So in doing that was, you try and put the positive light on absolutely everything you do. We were lucky to get a bus donated from First Bus in Glasgow, and we totally stuck it straight back to a shell and put, electric couches for people to be, examined from the gastro to the diabetes. We're now taking it to football games so people can get early intervention diabetes screening. Because if you think about it, if we're going to a football game with 4,000 people, like 3,000 people, like 2,000 people, you think if you were to go to get checked, that's potentially that journey made, maybe not all in cars, granted, however, there would be probably a high percentage of that. So we try to go that way.
And the training process that they go through and how receptive they are to EVs. But I was just curious about the guys at St Andrews, and Paul must give you some heart.
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of things Paul's mentioning there rings a bell. Like say, working in silos. COVID for us as well was a bit to change how we work very quickly. We've got students from about 110 different countries. A lot of these students couldn't get home.
Yeah.
and they normally go into one area to get fed. We had to go out and feed them during that time because they were restricted where they could go.
Yeah.
So that was a big challenge for us at that time. We worked the emergency on-call service. Again, we had to keep that going. We've got, like I said, the research material, what to make sure that that was protected, and our -80 freezers were, you know what, we had to keep all that working and up and running so we didn't lose anything. So our emergency on-call guys, we then at that time gave them vehicles to come in battles for us to work, because before that they used their own vehicles for that. And that's one thing we're changing now. We're going to be giving them a vehicle while they're on call to get back in and out of the town to respond to the emergency on calls. University is made up of a lot of schools and businesses and colleges, and they all work to their own sort of remit.
Yeah.
And we're trying to get that. We're trying to get the joint working in with them now. We've got vehicles that will no sit and do maybe 10 mile a week. There's maybe 4 or 5 vehicles sitting doing that every week. But it's their vehicle, and they're quite protective about that.
Yeah.
We're saying this should be a pool vehicle that you can utilise and book out. And that's going to be a challenge for us when we take over the management of the vehicle.
So collaboration is really, really important. Paul, using your experience, how do you overcome that small-minded, this is mine kind of mentality to say, we've got something that we can all drink from? How do you do that? Is it like going in at the highest level and talking at chief exec level? Is it on the ground talking to a fellow fleet manager? How do you go about doing that?
So the best example to use is we recently started a thing called FORF. It's not transport related. If you take the themes, and it's like down at Glasgow University. So Glasgow University was shutting down a big massive 3-floor office, and we took all their desks and put them in storage. So when somebody was needing a desk, if it was broken or you had a new member of staff, whatever, you would just call out the water, and it was all free. So if you actually think about the sustainability element of that, so you were reusing, recycling, and we were doing that. That was all in collaboration with, like, you know, schools, universities, private sectors. Because if you think about COVID, everybody's office is shut. A lot of people didn't go back to office. It was all this surplus stuff.
Yeah.
And the money that it saved at the sustainability element, because you know the packaging and you're taking vehicles and you're slimmed down in a bit of logistics. But I don't think you go in at the top. Certainly, speaking on behalf of NHS, I think there's too much in at the top. You have to filter it where we've got less of a responsibility in our portfolios. When we have a sustainability governance group, we've got a sustainability team that's grew and grew and grew. And probably, you know, it's now got 7 or 8 in it. The thing that always amazes me about the sustainability team, again, for Ed and out, is they don't deliver on anything, they just oversee. So if I was wanting to go and say, right, I'm taking 100 diesels off and I'm putting 100 litres, so I'd report it to them, they would report it back as your thing. They hold the purse strings for a lot of smaller pots of funding locally.
Yeah,
That's brilliant. Bob, and
I was going to say, just on that kind of situation, or Paul's highlighted the telematics in vehicles and having that data is, I think it's crucial to counter some of the objections that you can get from people or you know, departments about, oh, you know, we need that vehicle, and you've got the data. No, you don't. You know, that was really crucial in me being able to.
So telematics is something we've looked at quite in depth. Both of us have looked at that over the
I
last
think,
year.
I think it's a really good thing.
I would agree to that. Totally invaluable having the telematics, having that data to back up that, I say argument, but that discussion with the service users of the vehicles, invaluable. I've done exactly the same as what Bob's referring to just this week, and basically told one service, I want their vehicles back by the end of the month.
There was just a few points on that. So Paul, what you said about talking to NHS England and them being so far behind, we've found the same with EV training. IMI, Institute of Motor Industry, have continuously come to Scotland and Scotland's colleges, and again are piloting their hydrogen qualification because of the success they've had with the EV training project that we did with Transport Scotland and upskilling. So just to let everybody know that we are doing well, I suppose, because it's easy to get into that kind of frame of, oh, we're not doing good enough, when actually we are making progress. And I think you alluded to that, Paul. The other thing is about the collaboration, the shared resources type thing. That's kind of what we do. So there's 6 of us, basically, including our admin staff, and all our other staff or members are all members of the colleges. Now, we do a kind of various informative kind of trying to bring people along on the journey, and it's at multi-level. So what you're saying there as well. So we'll go in with senior management, we'll do learning journeys towards new technologies, but we'll also do the same with the delivery staff. We have training networks where we have those lecturing staff that are delivering automotive skills. They get together, they have that kind of shared, they can talk to each other, and they can share best practice. But one of the things we do is provide shared resources.
Not specific to sort of pool cars and the public sector work, but the work that we've done previously through ScotZeb phase 1. I know, Billy, actually, you might be able to tell if it's still ongoing, but I understand that the Caledonia First Bus Depot was open to Police Scotland charging vehicles a couple of years ago alongside DPD. And we've just done a second round of funding through ScotZeb that's planning to electrify 20 bus depots across Scotland from the sort of central belt all the way up. I know there's a depot getting electrified on Orkney. So sort of a broad range of infrastructure that we'll be part funding. And we are really, really open. It was in the guidance of the scheme, and we're continuing to work with Zenobi, who are delivering the project, and encouraging that broader collaboration. So if there is anybody here interested, or anybody that you know, that we can map these depots out for you, and we can put you in touch with organisations that want to share. And the incentive, you've touched on that, for those installing the charge points is a bit of cash exchange, but it takes the other incentive for those want to utilise that infrastructure is it takes the risk of planning and taking on the financial risk of installing your own. You can just lease and utilise and get a shared rate from the infrastructure that already exists. So we are doing work in that space, and we want to expand that out and incentivise those who maybe are more comfortable owning the vehicles, but less so the infrastructure. We want to be able to enable that sharing, and as we've already said several times, sweat those assets as much as possible.
Richard, data, my friend.
We're moving on the agenda.
Yeah.
Biding my time. I didn't know whether to.
Let's move on. Thank you for all you've done, Matt. Richard, data is, as everybody has said, really, really important. Capturing vehicle data. Does everybody use telematics and data within their fleets?
Yes.
No,
Yep.
just St Andrews guys. Billy, yes. Glasgow, yes. So, the opportunity that data provides is that you know what you know. You know where you go, what you do, how you do it. Those that don't use telematics may think that they understand their transport and that they are doing it in the most efficient, best way. In your experience, is that right? Or is telematics giving you, putting the science behind that and proving what you know?
Yeah, I think there's several stages to it. So first of all, you have to have a period of time, you haven't got telematics, or you're in the process of having telematics, where that starts to give you operational data, and you can use that, and over a period of time you start to learn trends and analysis of how you can leverage the data. Once you've got the operational data down, then it can start to influence decision making. So that's when it becomes the second stage, where you've had a period of time. There was a case study we've been doing with Deloitte in America. They were saying you need a minimum, if you have a small pool of vehicles, you need a minimum of 3 months before you start making any decisions really. So you take that data, you look at it, and the sort of things you're looking to understand really from the telematics is that we have an integration with GeoTab, for example, which is one, but you can have, there's so many different telematic providers out there. And GeoTab offers something like 54,000 data points off a vehicle. So then that presents challenges in itself, because you can become inundated with volumes of mass data, and there's terabytes of data can come off vehicles. You've got to be very careful. So then you have to start to be quite selective. So then you become strategic, because then you start to say, well, what do we need to know to help influence our decisions? And they're the data points that you want to observe and monitor over a period of time. Some of the things you can look to do, I was just making a few notes, listening to a few conversations, is when you analyse your operational data, you want to look at things like dwell cycles, things like that. So what are the operational requirements? And you can break that down into regions. You can break that down into divisions or different business sectors within your operation anyway. Because then when you start to get that data, one solution for one depot might not necessarily work for another depot. And that's where the telematics over a period of time will help you with your decision making when you get to that point. And that's the beautiful thing with the data after a period of time, it enables you to say, well, we can do this, but we can't do that. So then it becomes quite strategic, and you can start to look at what you can and you cannot do until things have infrastructure-wise have improved. That seems to be the biggest challenge that we see with our customers globally, is the infrastructure piece. That always seems to be what do you do with depots, how do you get planning permission, all these other things can have to be factored into your plan, your roadmap for when you implement your electric vehicles.
I think that sort of health and safety side of things was the message that helped get the telematics kind of approved. But it's not just about, you know, Big Brother watching you. You know, you actually know what's happening with the vehicle, and if there's any issues or there's an accident, and you know.
You can get all sorts of data like harsh braking, harsh cornering, not wearing a seatbelt. All these are relevant things that as a duty of care to employees. But what that can do for that, when you get those sorts of levels of data, that you can start to, if you've got EVs, you can start to help increase range and reduce maintenance costs like brake pads, all those sorts of things. But what you can start to do is even potentially coach those in preparation for EV. So if you start to address the harsh braking, the harsh cornering, those sorts of things, that data, you can help transition them to that.
Paul mentioned training of drivers and getting people in to support that. Cops are notoriously the hardest people to please when it comes to giving them new vehicles. How have you found that process of bringing new vehicles into the service, and how have you got over that initial, well, I'm not driving an EV thing?
So many points already come up in this meeting. My notes are getting longer and longer and longer. Probably to jump back first before we answer the question of yours. Amber brought it up obviously the first bus, and you mentioned it as well, Paul. Prior to COP26, Graham McFarland, the commercial director at First Bus, had contacted me to say, do you want to come across to Caledonia Road, have a look and see what they're doing. They've got 80 ultra rapid 175 kilowatt chargers at Caledonia Road. Phenomenal. Wow. So I went across, spoke to him, and he said, look, we're looking for sort of blue chip partners, was the wording he used, and say during the day these chargers are lying dormant when our buses are out. So between 8:30 in the morning and I think it's 4:30 to 5:30 at night, we're looking for people to use them. So they gave us access. Again, we only issue a single RFID card, it's a CPS card that we use, but I get access to something that is 13,000 chargers now because I get EV Pulse and Charge Master on that same card. So we started using Caledonia Road at COP26 to try and support us. I've now got quite good infrastructure myself around Glasgow. I think I've got 60 or 70 offices completed for infrastructure. But in Aberdeen, I've only got 2 offices completed with EV infrastructure. So I now use King Street, Aberdeen, and they've got 36 ultra rapid chargers in there. So we get access to them again during the day. Scotston's online as well now. I don't use it again because I've got good infrastructure in and around Glasgow anyway. But again, it's looking at that collaboration. Who else can you work with to get access? I get access to Ineos as well in Grangeland. They've got chargers there. So it's a case of talking to companies in an area where you potentially you don't have chargers yourself at the moment, or you don't have enough chargers at the moment, and working round about that.
I think telematics now more than ever is a tool for us to use to make decisions.
Yes.
So that data will drive the decisions we make within fleet, whether it's vehicle replacements, type of vehicle, whatever it might be, but very much data-driven decisions now.
Yeah.
So
One of the best business cases because that essentially is what you're after, right? It's making business cases for vehicle purchase, charging infrastructure, you know, timings, when, where. But one of the best ones we did was for Transport for London. The company that runs Doctors Light Railway had a fleet of diesel vehicles that they were doing all their maintenance call-outs for across the Doctors Light Railway, and they wanted to go EV. They had a telematics company on board that were able to tell them what their vehicles were doing, when and where, etc. So they knew they were able to do it, but their sort of grey area was what they did in the event of a serious incident at a certain period of time, and they couldn't work out whether they were right on the seesaw of whether AC charging was enough, whether their standard AC charging across their car park for each vehicle was enough, or whether they needed a rapid unit to turn vehicles around quickly. And we were in the conversations with them around the table or with their operational team, and one of the guys said, what's the penalty if we don't make our SLA with TfL? And somebody said, oh, it's X amount of money, and it was more than the cost of the rapid, and that was it. Decision made. Like, you know, they can't afford to miss that SLA, so therefore that paid for the rapid in hindsight, I suppose.
You know the old adage,
don't let the vehicle go down to below 20%, charge it before then, and only up to 80%. What they discovered was that if you charged their van, Toyota ProAce, if you charged it at 20%, they'd get about 50 kilowatts an hour into the vehicle. If you let that go down to 7, 8%, single digits, before you charged it, you get almost 100 kilowatts an hour. And nobody had ever seen this before. And it all came out from telematics, all came out from the data. And it was absolutely fascinating because the light bulb went on and people said, right, okay, so I just keep driving it. Forget about range anxiety, that doesn't exist. I can actually charge twice as fast from the get-go by depleting the battery further. Wow. And that just blew my mind that there were still
Very vehicle dependent. though.
yeah, but those are the little nuggets that you can pull out and that operationally, that means that if you're driving that vehicle, you can drive it further, charge faster, and get on your way again. It performs much better than anybody expected it to. Not only telemetry will tell us that. When I was a boy, and we first started to get EVs into fleets, we used to say that if you lease them, you de-risk the investment because ultimately the leasing company picks up the risk in that new technology. And as battery technology changes, that's your problem. So as we get bigger and bigger ranges, go further, we give the old ones back to you, you take them away, you deal with them, and we get brand new shiny ones. There's a whole tranche of the world which is still buying their vehicles outright and keeping them going for donkey's years. What are the pros and cons between buying vehicles outright and leasing, as far as you're concerned?
So I need to take all self-interest out of this.
Yeah.
We'll just go up the road. So, yeah, you're totally right. What you say. At the end of the day, if you lease the vehicle, we take the risk. Residual value changes, anything like that, depreciation, it's not really your problem. If you say you hand it back to us, we have the issue of disposing of it at a price that we've set at the start to try and make sure that we don't lose any money on it. The problem, I'll come back to your question, the problem we've had, and I'm not going to try and be negative, but I'll just try and be factual. The problem in the industry just now is that EV residual values have absolutely plummeted. They have massively fallen off a cliff over the last 18 months to 2 years. Elon didn't help when he cut the price of all the Teslas, but yeah, there've been a couple of different factors: supply, chips, Ukraine, COVID. It's all kind of been part of a bigger problem. There's still a massive pricing differential between the cost of an ICE vehicle and the cost of the comparative EV. Cost of the metal, take away anything else, just the cost to purchase the vehicle, there's still a massive differential there between the two, which gives any, whether you're a retailer in the automotive industry, whether you're a leasing company, whether you're a rental company, that gives you an issue if the cost of the thing is more expensive. So yeah, residual value's been a massive problem. So yeah, getting back to your point, if you lease it, you don't have that issue. It's not your problem. You run them, you obviously lease them, you pay your monthly rental and you hand them back and it's not your issue. Where the argument for purchase comes in is that you have a tangible asset. So you buy the thing, if you're lucky enough to have pots of money that you can go and spend and buy vehicles, you can do that. You have the asset, and at which point you want to cash that in, you can, but going back to the original point, you take on the residual value risk.
Will take on board your requirements, a business's requirements, a customer's requirements, and then go to market if required. If we believe we have an existing relationship with the manufacturer that would satisfy your needs 100%, then we'll give you that information. It's very much not just here's your quote, like here's your box, this is what you want. Because every case is different. There's no one blueprint for a charging requirement. It will be it might be slightly different in terms of the power output, or you might not have the capacity on site, so it's battery storage, etc. And so rather than I mean, there are companies, providers out there that will say these are our 4 charge points, which one do you want?
Yeah.
And that's fine, that's one model. But there are others like us who will say, okay, you have this depot that needs this, but this depot that needs that. Actually, it makes sense to use this manufacturer here and this one here because of this, and we'll build it that way. It's much more solutions based than boxes, essentially.
Talk to us about charging right from the get go, because we had St Andrew saying this morning, and I think Paul as well from Aberdeenshire about depot charging, home charging. There's lots of different sorts of charging, and Paul, the cameraman, was asking about the different speeds of charging and
Yeah.
what that all means. And help us, tell us about your world.
There's a lot to unpack in that, isn't there? I'll tell you what, I'll do the charging speeds, type of charger stuff for those that don't know. I'll try and keep it really simple in just a kind of a basic overview. And then I'll ask you to ask your question, Matt, that you asked just before lunch about charge point leasing. Chargers essentially are broken down into two categories. AC, if you know your electronics, AC is just your alternate current that comes out your plug socket. That's your kind of standard power. They're slower. They tend to start at 7 kilowatts ish, 7.4. They can be throttled back to sort of 3.6 kilowatts, but obviously that means that you're only getting 3.6 or 7 kilowatts per hour. So if you have for example, just to make my maths easier, if you have a 49 kilowatt hour battery set in a vehicle, it's going to take you 7 hours to charge that vehicle. They can go up to at truck level anyway, they can go up to 43 kilowatts. Standard for passenger vehicles is around 22. I'll come back to the truck one again in a minute. But the threshold really for DC charging tends to be around the 50 kilowatt, 45 to 50 kilowatt. DC is direct current. Essentially, it goes through a rectifier in the charger itself. What that means is you miss out the onboard controller of the car. You're essentially charging the batteries direct, which means it's quicker, which means it generates less heat, etc., etc. So it's more efficient. But you obviously have to pay for all the equipment that lives in the charger, so they are infinitely more expensive and they're heavier. But as I mentioned earlier in the conversations around business cases for chargers, particularly if you're operating like a bus fleet, we were talking about earlier with First Bus, a 7 kilowatt charger is going to get you nowhere. But the DC charger will turn it around within the dwell times required, as per the data, as we mentioned earlier. The interesting one at the minute that we're seeing the kind of emergence of is a HGV AC charger. The reason I mention that is that it's been around forever actually, but no one really kind of picked up on it because passenger vehicles, aren't able, again, because of the onboard controller in the car, passenger vehicles have never been able to charge at above sort of 22 kilowatt or so. And actually the amount of passenger vehicles that charge at 22 kilowatts now is quite slim. There's not many. The sort of Teslas of this world charge at 11. Standards is for 7s because the onboard charge controllers are so expensive. It tends to make more sense for the manufacturers to plonk a 7 kilowatt charge controller in the vehicle and let you do anything bigger than that on a DC. With HGV or truck charging, what we found quite interesting is that particularly Volvo Trucks, who we do a lot of work with, and Renault Trucks, who we're already in conversations with, because one of the manufacturers we work with offers a 43 kilowatt single leaded charger. So it's still AC, still goes through the charge controller, but because it's a truck, the truck can handle 43 kilowatts on an AC. What that essentially means is that if you compare one with the other, if you compare a DC charger at 45-ish, 50 kilowatts, or a 43 kilowatt AC charger, your cost saving is, well, at least 10 grand, if not more. You've got no civil works. These things can be wall mounted. They cost somewhere in the region of about 6 grand versus 10, 15 grand plus. And it just means that we're able to provide that level of charging at a fraction of the cost. So particularly where you may have dwell times, like we mentioned before, where the trucks are out all day, the buses are out all day, even at a sort of 450 kilowatt hour battery set, if you have 10 hours plugged into that unit at stone dead empty, you're fully charged by the time the bus driver comes to pick the bus up or the truck driver comes to pick the truck up. It's the same reason why At the minute, we're working with a company that operate out of Dartford. They want to do their final mile deliveries into London exclusively in zero emission vehicles. And so consequently, we've got a fleet, quite literally a fleet of 43 kilowatt chargers that we're installing at their depot that will do exactly what they need it to. It charges the vehicle within a period of time. They have the data that tells them that the vehicles will make their round trip around the M25, and then they come back and recharge on these units, and these units are significantly less in terms of cost than they thought it would be. At one point, they needed new substations and the like. They now only need a new substation because they also want megawatt charging on site, which they're opening to the other truck company down the road to charge. Again, this whole hybrid charging thing. So it's not just a simple case of do you need 7 kilowatt AC or do you need 50 kilowatt DC? It's not that simple. Please don't let anybody tell you it is. It's not. Here's the label on the box. Which one do you want? It's quite simply, what are your needs? What do you want to do with it? How do you want to utilize it? Who do you want to open it up to, if anyone? And then what are your kind of budgets? And yeah, okay, money talks, but if you've got a budget for a certain amount, and you're able to at least present a business case for return on investment, then yeah, the possibilities are endless, really.
Yeah, I was very interested to hear about the leasing, and I was curious to know what the business case is for an organisation leasing charge points from you versus effectively contracting you to provide the full package, so you own the charge points and effectively just pay the cost of the a tariff for charging their vehicles.
So so I suppose like you say, the traditional model of CapEx ownership is, they receive quotes, proposals, pay said quotes and proposals. They own everything to do with it, and then the ongoing sort of OpEx is simply from a maintenance or support piece. What the lease allows is for businesses that, well, it's twofold. Either that aren't cash rich at that point. They don't necessarily have a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow to pay for those charges to spread the cost of that. But I think the more interesting one really is around businesses that plan to use their or open their charges to other organisations, as we mentioned earlier about collaboration, about allowing access to other companies to use chargers when they're not in use, when they're dormant, when the office is empty. What you're able to do then is obviously by spreading the cost, you can bring the return on investment into that to work out the actual true cost of ownership, which then will reduce. And particularly if you have a business case, again, as we mentioned before, a business case of, these 4 organisations want to use our chargers. When we're not using them, we charge them X, it's cost us Y. Therefore, the difference is the true cost of that installation over a period of X amount of years.
Well, I think for me, it's just good to hear that other people are having the same kind of issues as we are. Yeah, and I feel myself sitting nodding my head quite a lot. So, oh, yeah, that's that. Yeah, it's exactly what happens to us. I think the main one though is that how much the telematics could pretty much just change the whole way we do things. It would influence everything down to how we buy the vehicles, what vehicles we're buying, how we charge them, what decision making, everything. So I think that's key. That's probably the main thing for me is, we need that in place.
So I think the main thing, absolutely echo what Amber was saying. Like, it's been so positive. Dave, we were talking about that at lunchtime. Just, it's really good to kind of get in the room and just talk to people. And there are some challenges, but people looking at it and how do I solve this rather than, oh, I can't do this. So that was really positive. On a kind of more professional, from my kind of perspective, note was definitely the bit about the education and the education of those that are maybe not touched by EVs at the moment. So again, back to the kind of the insurers and things like that. I've written down, under what legislation are you not allowing EV charge points? Because that for me, like, when you're talking to people and they know a little bit and they don't quite know enough, it's going to be really good for me to challenge that, I think.
Yeah.
And also the open charge point protocol bit as well. Again, for similar reasons, it allows me to kind of throw back, well, that's your excuse, But what about this?
I'll be super quick because I know we're at time. I think two things have impressed me today. Hearing everyone, I'm very impressed with the pragmatism here. I think there's a very can-do attitude, even if you haven't been able to maybe go as fast or whatever or restricted by finances and budgets. I'm really impressed at the pragmatism of the people cracking on and doing what they can within the realms of God. And the other thing as well is, I know there's been a lot of talk about EV, but I've been encouraged to hear about not just limiting it to one technology. So looking at things like hydrogen and other things, because this is about sustainability.
Yeah.
It's not just about electrification. So I found that quite good to hear that this isn't just we're not just focused on EV, we're broadening our horizons and making sure we explore the other technologies. So I've really enjoyed hearing that as well.
Things high, and I'd go a step further. I don't mind what you use to fuel your vehicles: petrol, diesel, used chip fat, electricity. Actually, I don't mind. What frustrates me is when people don't see the opportunity to improve. So if you're currently driving diesel and it's not Euro 6, get it sorted, because you can do better. If you're driving petrol and you're not driving something which is efficient, get it changed when you can and think about it. If you're driving EV, great, okay, happy days. Are you driving in the right way and efficiently and effectively? There are improvements we can all make no matter what we drive.